It's a Tuesday episode of Locked On Grizzlies, and Zach Edey and Desmond Bane both look ready for the regular season to begin right now. Zach Edey dominating the Pacers en route to a Memphis win in Indianapolis. You also have Desmond Bane looking like he's ready to begin the season right now. Then Jay Huff, our commenters on YouTube, saying, what about Jay? We'll talk about that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this Tuesday episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax. A bit of an upset here at the day after a game, joined by my co-host of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer, Damichael Cole. Shout out to Zach Edey beating up on the Pacers so badly he didn't have to play the whole fourth quarter, and that allowed for Damichael to get his work done so he can join us on this episode of the podcast. It's always a good day when the two of us are together, and we're grateful that you are here with us along for the ride on this Tuesday episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode is brought to you and sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We are free and available here at Locked On Grizzlies as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. Literally anywhere you get a podcast, you can get Locked On Grizzlies, and we are so grateful that you are with us each and every time an episode drops, whether it's on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, literally anywhere you can get a podcast, Locked On Grizzlies is with you for NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content. Damichael, it was a wonderful showing for Memphis in their second to last preseason game.
Wire to wire.
Preseason road finale. That's exactly right. They took a 14-point lead in the first quarter, and they never really looked back. Indy tried to make it interesting there.
The Indianapolis Pacers.
Again, I can't stress enough. It just shows how little I care.
Joe's ready for the regular season, man.
If you haven't noticed, it's a bit at this stage, right? And I think that people in the comments, I didn't get crushed as much as I thought I was going to for not knowing who the heck they played on Saturday. Because I think people agree with me. Who cares are they in Indianapolis? Are they in Peoria, Illinois? Illinois and Indiana both have eyes at the start. It doesn't matter who the actual
in your defense, it's the Indiana Fever, Indiana Pacers, Indianapolis Colts.
Very confusing. But again, I feel like I proved I'm locked in here to Michael. I just pulled the Illinois and Indiana thing.
Oh, yeah, you're locked in for sure.
I'm locked in with my states of the United States of America that have the same first letter. But I digress. Obviously, a preseason game that means nothing from the opponent's side, right? No Tyrese Halliburton. This was not a game that the Pacers were necessarily interested in winning. I would argue that the Grizzlies weren't necessarily interested in winning it either, but it always is good to see players compete and compete at a high level. And we'll lead off with Zach Edey, who did not start this contest, which I found interesting, partner. Maybe you have some insights into that. 23 points, 9 rebounds, 10 of 15 from the field. He actually shot a 3 in this game.
He was feeling good. I mean, he let that one ride, too. He didn't even think about it.
And he only shot 1 less 3 than John Conchar, right? So that's good for him that he's almost on pace with John Conchar attempts already in his illustrious NBA career that's lasted literally 4 preseason games.
Yep.
But I think that the big thing when it comes to Edey, and I'm going to rain on the parade of folks a little bit here, and I don't mean to. I know we've had a rough 18 months or so in Memphis as Memphis Grizzlies followers and fans. It's a preseason game in which Jaren Jackson Jr. and Ja Morant did not play. What Edey looks like alongside the healthy version of this team, the fully intact version of this team, is going to look different than what you saw against the Pacers on Monday night. However, I'll always give you credit for it. I think you phrase it really well. They don't need him to be a star. They need him to be an elite role player. And I think watching him utilize his body in terms of positioning, the way that he was rebounding, again, in roughly 19 or 20 minutes of play, for him to almost have a double-double, there are reasons to be optimistic. I mentioned that Tyrese Halliburton didn't play. You know who did play? Miles Turner, who is a starting center and one of the better starting centers in the NBA. You know who else played? numerous
Yeah,
bigs.
Isaiah
Or
Jackson, James
Isaiah
Wiseman.
Jackson. Yes, guys that are going to see time on this Pacers team. Pascal Siakam didn't play.
No.
Obviously, that matters. But it's not like it was complete and total lack of talent from that Pacers front court. There were some names out there, and Zach Edey competed admirably against them. He's not going to do this when Ja and Jaren are on the floor. But for spurts, the fact that he can do this is pretty good for Memphis early on.
It's really good. It's really good. And I agree with you somewhat there, but Joe, I'm actually going to pivot here. I think some of those shots that he was getting, this isn't any intel on my part, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ja Morant was one of the people who's been emphasizing, hey, let's make sure we feed him the ball. I know for a fact, based off the story that I wrote a couple days ago, Desmond Bane was the main player who told me we have to be better at getting Zach Edey the ball. So it's the star guys actually who are the ones who are saying we got to feed the big man. We got a guy who can score on the inside, and we got to make sure that we get him the ball. Now, of course, where I agree with you is at the end of the day, it's going to be more dynamic scores. It's going to be Desmond Bane on the floor, who had 23 points. We'll talk about a little bit later. It's going to be Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., Ja Morant. So naturally, when those guys get in the flow and get their points, there are going to be less opportunities. But the way he scored, I think that'll work. This game was the best example yet of the Grizzlies mixing their up-tempo, fast-paced style with getting Zach Edey touches. Remember at first when I was talking to the guys about, why isn't Zach Edey getting a lot of touches right now? Everybody's talking about the pace, right? Oh, it's because of the pace. We're getting up and down, and it's hard to, basically feed a guy in the interior and just let him work while we're trying to play fast. The Grizzlies still put together a decent day, with transition scoring. I think they finished with 18 fast break points in this game. They did that while also mixing in post touches for Zach Edey. And when it became clear the Pacers can't do nothing with this dude, they just fed him. And that's what the fans have been asking for. That's what, the media, we were talking to the players about. There have been glimpses, right? I talked about that right-handed hook shot when I was talking to his coaches at Purdue. They say he reps that shot so much, over 100 hook shots before each practice while he was at Purdue. So seeing him get to that patented, hook shot, that's nothing new. But here's the thing. I do agree that he won't get as many, but there will be certain instances in certain games where the star players will even recognize that's our mismatch. Let's go to him. It's good to see that he can take advantage of that moment. And he did so against, I think, a decent pair of bigs. Isaiah Jackson is no slump as well. We know Miles Turner isn't, but a decent night overall for Zach Edey on both sides of the floor. Thought he played well.
Remind me, I know that, shameless plug here, GBB Live, back when I hosted it, was the first podcast that brought Damichael Cole, newly acquired beat writer for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah. When you came to Memphis, was Jonas Valanciunas still on the team?
No. It was Steven Adams.
So you didn't get a chance to see Jonas Valanciunas, at least not in your current role.
Yeah, not in my current role.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm a little hesitant to be on board the same way that you're on board with the way that Edey was fed. I've seen this song and dance before. Mm-hmm. And Jonas Valanciunas' game was very much determined by his ability to play at and around the rim.
Yep.
Ja Morant's game is very much determined by his ability to play at and around the rim. I view Zach Edey as an opportunity for the Grizzlies to marry the two bigs, right? Steven Adams, Jonas Valanciunas. If they need Zach Edey to be that guy, to be the one that we saw against the Pacers, the offense gets stagnant, like it would several years ago when Jonas was a part of the roster. They know that they can get the ball to him and get some easy buckets. But the offense is going to operate at peak optimization when it is Edey being the screener, Edey being the threat, Edey being the one that is creating these larger opportunities because of his frame and his rebounding, the way that he sets these screens. He's a souped up version of Steven Adams in that way, at least the way that I think he could be implemented. I worry that if we get overly excited, and I'm not saying you are, I'm saying in general.
No, I hear you. Yeah.
If we get overly excited about Edey, the post scorer, Matt Moore said some pretty wild things on X on Monday. One of them I'll just kind of leave alone, but there was something that he said that I do, and you probably know what I'm talking about. That there was one of them that I did agree with, and it was about, it never fails that fans are going to get excited about post touches in preseason basketball.
Oh yeah.
That's just not how the NBA operates. Now, if you want to be optimistic, if you're an Edey fan in that way, when the league zigs, the Grizzlies traditionally have zagged.
But this system is designed to get up and down. Yeah.
Right. And that's not something that you necessarily do consistently. Like there is an early score for him. He seals off a guy because he gets leverage and it's a quick pass in transition. That I could see happening. But the Zach Randolph, Jonas Valanciunas, get him to him on the block.
And everybody move out of the way, yeah.
You're not going to see that a ton, especially once he plays next to Morant and Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. At least I don't think so. I could be wrong. And in fairness, we haven't seen enough of it to really have a concrete opinion on that sort of thing. Let Damichael and I know what you guys are thinking in the comments. Hit us up on X at Damichael C for Damichael, at Joe Mullinax for me. Am I being a big Debbie Downer here? Am I being a negative Nancy or whatever the phrase might be? Should we be giving a little bit more celebration for Zach Edey, or is it a preseason game in October? And he did good, he did well, but let's pump the brakes and realize who was playing, that sort of thing. Let us know on X or in the comments below. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Gametime. I love Gametime. I love hockey. And I love hockey in particular live. This might be a hot take to Michael Cole, but I would argue that hockey is the best sport to watch live and in person. The chill of the ice, the slam of the boards. Washington Capitals are my team. They made a run to the Stanley Cup Championship a little while ago, several years ago, and it was a blast to watch unfold. I'm a big Caps guy. Hopefully the Caps pick it back up this year, and hopefully I can make it back up north and catch some Capitals hockey thanks to our good friends at Gametime. Gametime has the Gametime picks where curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Toggling on the all-in pricing feature will show you the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy your tickets, and the lowest price guarantee means that Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a cheaper ticket. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. We had a Desmond Bane sighting, right? The one of the big three that actually played in this contest against the Indiana Pacers. 22 minutes for Bane. So probably right around what they were hoping for him in terms of PT. And this was the Desmond Bane that we've become accustomed to seeing, right? 23 points on really 16 shots, 3 for 5 from beyond the arc. The flyby king was back. I think he had a couple of those kinds of threes, couple of rebounds, couple of assists. He led the Grizzlies in scoring, except for his tie with Zach Edey. Only Zach Edey was more efficient offensively than Desmond Bane when you combined that with volume. I mentioned that he was the only Grizzlies star that played. No John Morant, no Jaren Jackson Jr. If you want to count Marcus Smart as a star, that's a loose definition of the term star, but Marcus Smart did not play. Desmond Bane looked good. For those that aren't familiar with the rest of the Grizzlies preseason schedule, if it seems like they've played a lot already, it's because they have. They've already played 4 preseason games. That was Indiana's 3rd preseason game for comparison. Memphis goes home now, right? They don't play again. Yep. They don't play again until Friday against the Miami Heat. They are in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm sure Damichael Cole will be in attendance for that contest. And then it's the end of the preseason, and the Grizzlies get ready for the Utah Jazz on the road next week. 1 game, 8 days, roughly, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen enough of Desmond Bane? Do you think that we are ready for him to take the rest of the preseason off? Maybe still practice, of course, But in terms of live action in a game, have you seen enough of Bane? And then on top of that, the Desmond Bane that you've seen this preseason, if you had to put a cap on his ceiling, is he an all-star? Is he a top 30 player in the NBA? What is realistic for fans to expect from him, not just the rest of this preseason if they sit him out Friday, but the season ahead for Desmond Bane?
I think I've seen enough of Desmond Bane to answer that part of the question. I've seen enough of him, but I'm going to zag here. I've not seen enough of the Grizzlies core. I want Friday to be a dress rehearsal type game. I know everyone's at this whole, it's preseason. Let's just bubble wrap these guys until next Wednesday. I want to say, let's go out here Friday, and if it's for a half, John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Zach Edey. I want to see that starting five for a half. I don't think that's too much to ask. The guys are relatively healthy. Marcus Smart's fine. Jaren is, ramping up, so to speak, but you got Tuesday, you got Wednesday, you got Thursday before Friday. And Ja is pretty much ready to go as well. So I want to see the core. I want to see the projected starting lineup at least once. We haven't seen the full projected starting five yet. At least one time before that game against the Utah Jazz. And I think that is possible. So with that being possible, I want to see Desmond Bane again as a result of that. Him individually, he has done enough. He is really taking advantage of these cuts. You mentioned, the flyby part of his game, but with the 23 points, I think he had 2 3-pointers. And that was because of the fact that he was cutting to the basket, and he was, of course, utilizing other areas of his games where he was scoring inside the arc. So I think he's going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of this system. We talked about it, I think, yesterday, the idea that when Steven Adams was here, he and Desmond Bane had this great rapport, and Desmond Bane would, get a lot of easy baskets off those cuts. When Steven Adams got hurt in January 2023, we haven't seen much of Desmond Bane getting those opportunities since then. There have been glimpses of it, but we have not seen it a lot. So with all that being said, I think going forward, there's a good idea that, this offense really suits Desmond Bane's style of play, but I want to see it with the stars. Getting to the other part of the question, with the all-star thing, I think Desmond Bane is in the conversation. He's a borderline guy. The Grizzlies, the numbers might work against them. We'll see, what the availability is like for Jaren, Ja, Dez, and all those guys. And then the guard position is just stacked in the West overall. But talent-wise, he's in the conversation for sure.
I think that it's going to be hard for all three of them to make it, obviously.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You would imagine that Ja Morant is going to be the one that gets the most shine in that terms of that opportunity. Maybe they can squeeze one more. It would be either Bane or Jaren, you would think. It just makes logical sense to me that Bane would be the odd man out.
Yeah. I mean, Sabonis didn't make it last season.
Right.
Imagine that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. It's a tough crew to crack, safe to say. I'm with you on wanting to see them all. And I guess hearing you say it, since you are the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, it gives me a little bit of reason to be excited. I want to see Ja, Jaren, Marcus, Edey, and Bane. I want to see that. Mm-hmm. I just assumed, given the history of this team with injuries, that we weren't going to see that. If that is an option, then Desmond Bane 100% should play on Friday to do that dress rehearsal idea that you just outlined. But, and this is a pretty important but here, if Ja and Jaren and Marcus do not play on Friday, I would not play Desmond Bane. Right. I don't need to see him next to the reserves any longer. The only reason Bane plays moving forward is if that means Ja and Jaren and Marcus Smart are out there. They need to start. We've talked about this. I'm sure we'll talk more about it later this week. The urgency to start fast should be there for this group. To just limp into the start of the regular season with those guys not playing, if they're able to, would be a mistake, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely understand. And each team is doing this their own way. We saw with the Sixers, they pretty much shut Joel Embiid down, for the remainder of the preseason. But then you saw the other side of it. It kind of backfired with, I think, Paul George hyperextended his knee. So there's no telling what that timeline is going to be like for him now. So you can argue both sides of this thing, because now Joel Embiid will start the season healthy and Paul George probably won't be healthy to start the season. So again, it's not a right or wrong answer in my opinion, but my opinion in this situation is I prefer the idea of at least one game, and particularly because you start this season at Utah, at Houston, two teams that, in my opinion, the Grizzlies are very capable of beating. But if you go into that game against Utah, it's the first game with Zach Edey and Jaren playing together, and we don't know how this is going to work yet. Lauri Markkanen is going to shoot your face off. And next thing you know, you're going to be down 20 in Utah, and you're going to be ready to go to Houston. And, those young dudes over there, you got Dylan Brooks going to be motivated and Steven Adams. And next thing you know, I mean, you got to win at least one of those games, I feel like. And, again, getting off to a great start has proven in the course over the last 4 or 5 years not to be a big deal for this Grizzlies team. In each of those 50-win seasons that they had a couple years ago, neither season did they get off to a great start. Specifically the 56-win season, they didn't really take off until December. So you can make an argument that, they can find their footing early in the season or whatever the case may be. But it is, in my opinion, what as loaded as the Western Conference is, what you start with 2 games on the road, and then your first home game, which is your third game of the season, is a back-to-back against an Orlando Magic team that can really play some defense. So you're going to be a little tired coming in that game, and they're going to be full court bumping you and pressuring you a little bit. Like you can't. I don't think you should just blow past the opportunity to use this game as a dress rehearsal.
And you have to remember the 56-win team that you just mentioned. Half of those guys are gone. This is a different looking team. They really need to make sure that they are getting off to a fast start, at least in my opinion. So let Damichael and I know what you're thinking on Bane's ceiling. Is he an all-star, a level below that? It sounds like we're both on the same plane with a level below that. But also let us know, do you agree that, both of us think that if Ja and Jaren and Marcus are ready to go, Bane should play and it should be a dress rehearsal. How should they treat that Friday final or preseason finale? Let us know in the comments or on X. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Maybe you got a hunch in the middle of the game last night. You knew that Aaron Rodgers was the king of the Hail Mary pass, the deep ball to end the half. Maybe you saw that coming. You had a little bit of fortitude. You wanted to put some money where your mouth was. You could check out the latest stats and view live play-by-play while making that kind of bet, plus so much more, all on the same page where you place any given bet. And you'll start with FanDuel with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You heard me right, $200 bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You get all of that and more over at FanDuel.com. Once again, that is FanDuel.com. Damichael, we got some folks in the comments saying we don't talk enough about Jay Huff. Now, I take personal offense to this.
Yeah, he's a Virginia
I'm
guy.
a UVA, go Who's go, wahoo wah basketball fan. I remember Sean Singletary. Do any of you remember Sean Singletary? Do you even know who Sean Singletary is, Damichael Cole?
I've never heard of him.
Never heard of him. Mm-hmm. I know who Sean Singletary is. I went to a party with Sean Singletary back in my day, back on the corner there in Charlottesville when I used to frequent the University of Virginia. I know about Bodo's Bagels. I know about all of the wonderful things that happen with third years and fourth years on the grounds of the University of Virginia. I even know who founded the University of Virginia, Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States of America.
Good trivia lesson over here.
Don't you dare, dear listener, dear viewer, accuse me of not talking enough about Jay Huff. I talk plenty about Jay Huff, the amount that is warranted, okay?
The amount that is warranted is the key there. I see what you just did.
I did a little bit of a heel turn there in the middle of that, to use wrestling vernacular. Jay Huff is the last man on the bench, okay? Jay Huff is playing in mop-up duty. Jay Huff is showing that he is a two-way player. in the NBA. I think he has that capacity. But Jay Huff has a lot of flaws in his game that are not going to warrant him being some, I saw people on X, Damichael, saying, let's sign this guy. Let's get him. He should be the other one that they bring up. Sign more two-way guys. And I don't know if it's the cynic in me. This is a UVA guy, and I just watch him play. I know that his floor spacing is attractive, but you have to remember who he's playing against. The ends of these games are essentially G League games as they are. If he goes and does that for the Memphis Hustle for 50 games and they decide they want to convert him, then cool, bring him in for the end of the season. But I am not willing to do that with this guy just yet. I need to see him against, the actual NBA rotation guys before I can make such a jump and a leap of faith.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where, I like to point out the fact that I give you what I think, and then there's Taylor Jenkins' thought process. In my opinion, of what we've seen, and Jay Huff has been, pretty decently good. Like, Jay Huff has shot the ball really well for number one. He's been one of the Grizzlies' best shooters, regardless of position, over the course of some league. The top of the key three-pointer is a really important part of this offense, and he has been serving as kind of a connector. Defensively, he can impact shots, at the rim, and that, again, that serves a purpose within this Grizzlies system. So you talk about the fact that the Grizzlies tried last season with Jaren Jackson Jr. to be more 5-out. This is a guy who can play center alongside of a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. and give you more of that 5-out element that the Grizzlies have flirted with over the course of time. But here's the thing. That's what I think. I don't know entirely what Taylor Jenkins thinks of Jay Huff's, ability to impact the rotation and things like that. But what I will tell you is Jay Huff did not get in until midway through the third quarter of this last game. And that itself, is kind of an indication of where he stands, in the midst of the, the things right now in terms of the rotation and in the outlook. He's been impressive. There's no denying that. A couple games ago, made 4 3-pointers, really, really terrific performance overall. But again, the Grizzlies typically are going to play Jaren Jackson Jr., Santi Aldama, and then there's going to be Zach Edey and Brandon Clark. Those are going to be your bigs. I've heard some people saying you're kind of campaigning for Jay Huff as your backup, center. And if that's the case, what do you do with Brandon Clark? Do you move him to the 4? Look. This is Damichael speaking. I don't want to see Brandon Clark at the 4 unless it's alongside of Jaren Jackson Jr. We've seen little pieces of Brandon Clark playing the floor alongside of Zach Edey in the preseason. If you've seen what I've seen, it ain't pretty.
It's not great.
If you remember, I know you remember this, Joe Mullinax. If you remember Brandon Clark playing alongside of Steven Adams, that is something that is so old because they stripped it very early in the process and late in the 2021-22 season, and then in the next year until Steven Adams got injured, we rarely, if ever, saw Brandon Clark take the floor alongside of Steven Adams.
And that was the right decision.
And 100%. The net rating numbers were terrible. Basically, if Brandon Clark is on the floor with Zach Edey, he's going to have to shoot the ball, and he hasn't shot the ball well from three-point range. Even though he wants to shoot it, he's kind of, said that he wants to get back to his rookie year three-point shooting numbers. Sounds good, but we haven't seen it yet. So with all that being said, there isn't really a pathway to playing time right now for Jay Huff. With Scottie Pippen Jr., it's a little bit different. He's the two-way guy we probably talked about a little bit more, simply because there is a potential rotation spot there for him. There's an argument to be had on whether he's grabbing a hold of it right now, but there is a spot for Scottie Pippen Jr. that's there for the taking, whereas Jay Huff, you're not taking one of those guys out of the rotation right now in order to put him in. But again, with all that being said, I think he is proven to be solid depth. If an injury were to happen, I like the idea of having Jay Huff as a guy who can step in 12 minutes, impact some shots at the rim, knock down some three-pointers. I think this is a guy who could play well alongside of like a guy like Ja. When Ja comes in with the second unit, midway through, late in the first quarter, early in the second quarter, I like what Jay Huff has done. I'm really impressed. But at the end of the day, there isn't really a pathway to him being in the rotation right now.
I want to stress, I'm a UVA guy. All right. I didn't go to UVA, but just in case, I many a time would leave that corner where all the fine establishments of Charlottesville are. I would go to the White Spot. Okay. And if you're a Charlottesville, Virginia person, you know exactly what the White Spot is. It's the perfect greasy cheeseburger around 2 a.m. on an early Sunday morning when you made bad decisions just a couple hours before. Okay. I understand the White Spot. All right. I am well aware of where Star Hill Brewery is and where all the beautiful wineries are. I know where John Paul Jones Arena is, the basketball stadium, or Scott Stadium for the football team. I have been to Charlottesville many times.
Sound like you used to I've proven that. You used to chug them back in your day, huh?
Back in my younger days. Okay. 20 years ago now. Jay Huff should not be getting minutes on this basketball team unless he plays backup point guard. You made an interesting point about Scottie Pippen Jr., which we'll talk about more on tomorrow's show.
Mm-hmm.
But Jay Huff should not be playing. He's not better than Brandon Clark. He's not better than Santi Aldama. He shouldn't be taking minutes from those guys. So as an emergency fifth big, like Xavier Tillman perhaps before him, but I like Jay Huff on that two-way contract because how many times did Xavier Tillman play when he was in that role? Not very many times. You play him when you need him. Right? You call him up from South Haven. You say, hey, Jay, we need you to come hit a couple of threes at the top of the key. Do that sort of stuff for us. He can be that guy in spurts. He should not be on the full-time roster, at least in my opinion. Let Damichael and I know in the comments. Sounds like we're on the same page again, partner. Let us know in the comments how you're feeling or hit us up on X for that as well. Thank you guys so much for being with us on this Tuesday edition of the podcast. It's been a lot of fun. I apologize for going on rants, but anytime my Virginia-ness is questioned, I'm going to pull out the Virginia in me, believe it or not. Speaking of pulling something out, I thought that Scottie Pippen would have pulled out this backup point guard job by now, partner. And you alluded to it a moment ago. He's your boy, right? You're a Scottie Pippen Jr. guy. Yeah. The only guy you love more than Scottie Pippen Jr. is Derrick Rose, and he's not on the roster anymore, right? Him and John Conchar, apparently. So, so I think we got to talk tomorrow about what's going on with Scottie Pippen Jr. And is there a world where he is not the guy that fills that roster spot? He did not look his best against the Pacers, and that was kind of true over the past weekend as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. This has been a great.
You're so mad at me.
This has been a great episode, Joe. Let's say that. I don't want to talk about that right now. I don't want to talk.
Oh man, we'll save Scottie Pippen Jr. for tomorrow's show. Thank you all so much for being with Damichael and I. If you are like Damichael and you love fantasy basketball and you want to make sure that Derrick Rose is still on your roster, even though he's no longer active in the NBA, you should check out Locked On Fantasy Basketball with Josh Lloyd. It's a great program. He does a phenomenal job. I finished drafting my fantasy league over the weekend. Very excited for my fantasy season, and I took Josh's advice pretty close to heart on some of my picks. So make sure you're checking out Locked On Fantasy Basketball literally as soon as Locked On Grizzlies concludes. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, literally anywhere you get a podcast, you can get Locked On Grizzlies and make us a part of your everyday Memphis Grizzlies and NBA consumption. Tomorrow is going to be a fun show, just like today was. I hope you're with us. Make sure you're staying locked in. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe wherever you get podcasts. We are free and available. Until next time, see ya.